from the Ticats Audio Network, this is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
And so it begins. The Labor Day Classics have been contested, and with most teams having about half a dozen games remaining in the regular season, plans are certainly being made for the playoffs. This is the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. So pleased to be talking football with all of you. I'm Bubba O'Neil. Well, as you know, you're locked on to the nation's favorite CFL podcast that features the very best columnists, insiders, broadcasters that the Three Down community has to offer. This week on the CFL This Week, he rides the sidelines on the Blue Bombers broadcast and hosts his own show on 680 CJOB in Winnipeg. Christian Aumell, certainly appreciate your participation.
My pleasure. Thanks for the ask, and I hope you don't mind that I've got a companion here that's going to try to bother and disrupt the show.
The video portion of this might be confused, but the audio certainly will not be. Also from the prairies, another good friend of the show. He's a sports editor at the well-read Regina Leader-Post. Taylor Shire, thanks for checking in.
Thanks as always for having me.
Right on. Hey, and this architect of the Niagara Sports Report, always a pleasure to chat with him. Rod Mawhood, great to have you.
Bubs, Christian, Taylor, thanks for having me, guys.
All right, let's get down to business, folks. I'm going to start here, Christian, right at the top with you. Chad Kelly's return to form, apparently slower than expected. That's back-to-back losses with him at the controls for the Toronto Argonauts. How patient can the team be with that number one quarterback?
Well, we've seen now maybe the best quarterbacks of the last two seasons come in and kind of be slow to get started, right? With Nathan Rourke needing a couple games, and even last week throws 3 picks. His team wins big, but he was good but not great. Chad Kelly throws 2 pick sixes, and that's just not going to get it done. Very East Final vibes in that loss to Ottawa. It's been slow. Again, it takes time because he didn't have a preseason, didn't have a training camp. He missed half the season and then gets tossed into it. And you'd expect a good quarterback who was the MOP last year to be right into it. I think Toronto can be patient because Hamilton isn't very good, and no offense, Bubba, but I think they're third, right? And so they've got time to get through this. Now, if they lose and Hamilton wins, there's certainly a little bit of pressure, but I think they've got enough of a cushion to just, okay, we're going to be third. We're not going to catch Ottawa now for a home playoff game, but let's get right so that we can go into Ottawa and win, go into Montreal and be confident that we can get the W. So I don't think there's a rush necessarily, but I think having a little bit of concern is justified, but patience is also warranted.
Rod, your thoughts?
I think patience is the word of the day, but I will say this. If the Argos decide to make a move at QB, it won't be questioned because of what happened with Kelly in the offseason or in the off-seasons, plural. I don't think anyone will question it because, yeah, he had a great year last year, but because of everything that's happened away from the field of play, if they make that move, no one will question it and no one will be surprised.
Taylor, do you think that has anything to do with it?
No, I think they've stuck by him and they've said that he is their guy and they're standing with him and supporting him through the suspension and obviously through the rest of the season here. So I don't know if the off-field stuff has much to do with it, in my opinion. But really, to answer your question, they can be as patient as they want. They can wait till November before they decide to, not be patient with him because, like Christian said, they're going to finish third. I don't see a scenario where they don't finish third and don't head to Ottawa for that playoff game, which is crazy to say just post-Labor Day that we sort of know how the East Division is going to shake out. When you look at the West Division, anybody could finish 1, 2, 3, 4. I still think Calgary is going to be finishing out of the playoffs, but I don't foresee a crossover based on how many games are left and how many points are up for grabs. So Toronto really is, destined for the playoffs, so they can be as patient as they want, and Chad Kelly can get up to speed. And as long as you're hot going into November, it doesn't really matter what your record is.
Taylor, you've been covering this league a long time. I don't know when's the last time I've seen a guy throw 2 pick sixes.
I believe, didn't Zach Caleros throw it a few years ago and they ended up still winning? I think it was against Saskatchewan too.
Yeah, no, I think there was a game against Montreal. They won 47-17, and 14 of Montreal's 17 points were off pick sixes, I think.
Yeah, and Zach threw
couple years
those, I
ago.
think, in the first half, right? And then there was another game where Zach threw 4 picks and still won the game. So yeah, the pick sixes are certainly not a recipe for success, but it has been done before. Maybe only once in the CFL, but it has been done. But yeah, not Chad Kelly-esque, not how he has been playing. I think he's had an okay year. Like he did enough to beat the Riders just a few weeks ago in his first game back, and certainly looked good and looked like he was getting better. So it's just a matter of time before he shakes the rust off. He's still got talent, and he's still an elite quarterback.
Well, with that said, Christian, he lost to the Tiger Cats, and he was roughed up pretty good by the crowd at Tim Hortons Field. And from what I'm hearing in Ottawa, they were pretty vocal with him when he stepped on the field too, or at least every time he stepped on the field. I think that has to be his sort of expectation, because I believe the Toronto Argonauts are 1-4 or 1-5 on the road this year.
Yeah, I think Chad Kelly, pardon me, he's going to have to expect that no matter where he goes. You can disagree or agree with the punishment of Chad Kelly, how many games he should have gotten, should he be playing, but you don't have to like that he's playing. You could still cheer against him, and as a fan, you have every right to enjoy if he's failing. And that's what's happening right now. I think in Ottawa, they had a lot of pleasure in that because they got to see their team win a huge game and take a step towards hosting a playoff game. But they also got to see Chad Kelly fail. And I think Chad Kelly's a guy who a lot of fans want to see fail because of the offseason stuff. And the fact that he was the MOP last year. And generally, if you're a really good player, guess what? Teams start to want you to lose because you're one of the better players. So I think his expectation is to hear that. But if he's, elite, if he's great, then he'll use that to fuel him and become better. And the Argos will start winning some road games because they're going to have to if they're going to go on the road and win the Grey Cup.
It's amazing to me, guys, that after the season Kelly had, and let's not talk about the stuff off the field, but on the field, what we saw last year was simply amazing, right? That was a sensational record that they had with 16-2. A guy in a first-year starting situation played as well as he did. And I often wonder that sign of weakness in the East final, guys, if that is still kind of hovering over him, that he can't get that, or maybe the team can, or players can't, or is that just me, guys? Rod, your thoughts?
No, you could definitely look at that maybe, and there's a bit of a confidence factor. Again, I think that goes more. I know you guys disagreed off the top, but I still think obviously everything that's happened off the field, and you said how the Hamilton fans treated him, how the Ottawa fans treated him. Most pro athletes, let's say, have to deal with that adversity, but Chad Kelly could be different. In fact, that maybe it's bothering him a little bit more, and that's part of the factor still that's getting to him. But yeah, there's definitely that's got to be in his back of his head, Bubs, that what happened last year for sure.
Christian?
I think there are moments in sports where you can only erase it in the playoffs. I think we're seeing that in like the Dallas Cowboys. Who cares how they do this year? Let's just wait till January, right?
Yeah.
And I think for the Argos, right, the East Final was a disaster last year, right? One of the best regular season teams we've ever seen, and they didn't. Part of it, I think, is they didn't play a meaningful game for like 2.5 months going into the game, and they came out flat and never really recovered. But Kelly sucked in that game. No way around it, right?
He was horrible.
He was horrible, right? 4 picks. There was a lost fumble too. It was an absolute mess of a game, and at every turn you're like, oh my god, it's just getting worse, and it got worse, and it got worse. How is it getting worse? And it kept getting worse. It was astonishing, honestly. And something like that, and then we have the off-season stuff, and he comes in halfway through the season. I think that does hang over somebody, and you have to erase it in the playoffs, right? Argos go, 8-10 even, like whatever. But if you can go into the Ottawa or go into Montreal and play well, win playoff games, guess what? Last year's going to be forgotten about. But if he goes into Ottawa and does what he does this past weekend in the playoffs, guess what? Now that's Chad Kelly's thing. His thing is being bad in the playoffs, right? You do it once, okay. You do it twice, that's a thing now. So you can erase it then, but until then, there's not much you can really do to change the legacy.
Taylor, if you were his teammate and you were part of that team, how would you feel?
I think what Christian said, it happened one time. We saw him win the Grey Cup, right? He came off and won the Grey Cup a year prior. So you can't say that he's not a playoff performer, right? Or that he doesn't rise up in the big occasions. He put together a great season last year and certainly looked great. And then it was one bad game, and that's all we're talking about because that was the biggest game, and we should be talking about that because of that. But I think we're so far removed from that. He's had obviously a lot of other stuff on his mind through the the first half of the season. So I don't know if he's thinking about. I would say as an athlete, you're not going to be thinking about past playoff performances until the playoffs come around again. He's just trying to get his confidence back under him through the regular season. And then, when the playoffs come around, he's certainly going to be thinking about, okay, here's what I did the last time the playoffs were, or the last time I played a playoff game, and I need to play better, or I need to do this different, or I need to. So I think until the playoffs is really when that East final from last year is going to be top of mind for him.
I'm going to start with the lone East guy here in this amongst this trio here. I find this real interesting in what was going on in the West Division. It is just a slobber knocker of in the terms of the standings. Okay, you have the Riders who are 5-7-1. The Stamps are 4-7. Rod, right now, which team do you trust to turn their season around and get on a roll?
The Riders, just because of the body language, the words that are coming out of Calgary right now. There's definitely a huge lack of confidence, a lot of question marks. So I say Saskatchewan has more of a chance of getting out of their funk, just because, Calgary, what's happened the past few weeks is astonishing. So
you're saying this based on the Riders being that bad, or sorry, the Stamps being that bad?
Yeah, and just the words coming out, and you heard Dave Dickinson say, "We're a bad team. We're playing bad football," and just some of the body language from the players, they've lost all confidence there.
Taylor?
Yeah, the fact that Calgary, I guess, benched Jake Maier and started Logan Bonner last week sort of says that all that needs to be said, that, they're looking to the future. They're seeing what else is out there. They're trying to find answers, right? So they haven't obviously necessarily given up on the season, but, they're facing an uphill battle. I don't foresee them making the playoffs this year. I really don't know if there's even a chance of them squeezing in, but Saskatchewan still has a chance, and they still are saying the right things, and they still, I believe, have a glimpse of that belief. If they're on a bye week right now, so they're not going to lose this week, but if they go into Calgary next week and lose that game, then I think all that belief is out the door, and you can start talking about next year, and you can talk about replacing Trevor Harris with Shea Patterson or doing some of those drastic moves, but they have that week 16 game in Calgary to say, okay, we're for real. We're going to make a playoff push. We're going to hold off Edmonton for that third playoff spot, and we're back in this. If they lose that game, then it's going to be a whole other story around here.
Christian, Bomber fans have to love what they're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, Saskatchewan hasn't won a game since July 19th. That's all that the Bombers need to have, right? But the Bombers also keep winning, and that's a big part of the story. Just a minor correction, Bob. You said Calgary's 4-7. They're 4-8, actually, so they're even worse.
It's even worse.
Yeah,
Sorry.
It's even worse. Yeah, I think Calgary's cooked. I didn't think they'd be very good. I'm not a big fan of Jake Maier. I just think he's just his ceiling is just meh, right? And they just find ways to lose. They kicked so many field goals. They put in Logan Bonner, has a good drive, and he throws a pick inside the 10, very Jake Maier-like, and then Edmonton goes off. I think Edmonton's rise has been very impressive. They fire Chris Jones, and guess what? Now they're winning a bunch of games, and it's McLeod Bethel-Thompson doing it. So I think with Winnipeg having a back-to-back coming up against the Elks, early in the season, we thought that was a bit of a free space on the bingo card. Not so much now. Edmonton's rolling, and so that's going to be a big test for a Bomber team that has, though, won 5 games in a row. They were 2-6. They were nowhere near the top of the division after they gave away the game to the Argonauts in July, right? 5 turnovers. They should have won that football game. They haven't lost since, and somehow they're in first, right? Because of a multitude of factors. 1, they've been good. 2, Saskatchewan hasn't won a game, right? That's part of the formula, too, for the Bombers to get in front. But Winnipeg also beat them twice. They beat BC twice. They're beating the teams around them in the standings, which is huge. Are they crushing anybody? Not really. They're not blowing anybody away like they have in years past, and yet they've got that DNA to find ways to win games, even if you're not at your absolute best. I think Winnipeg is... I want to say they're going to host the West Final. I know that the CFL simulator doesn't agree, and they're really high on the BC Lions, but I do think it's BC, Winnipeg, and Edmonton are the 3 playoff teams.
Wow.
And I think... I don't know. Calgary for sure is cooked. Saskatchewan, though, they do control their destiny a bit, and they're going to have to cheer for the Bombers, because if the Bombers sweep the Elks, then that gives Saskatchewan a much better chance of getting in.
Taylor, you give me the feeling in Regina and surrounding areas here, because, and I ask this question because this is possibly 3 straight seasons in a row of a real good start and an ending that leaves you just questioning what is going on.
Yeah, they can still write their own ending this year. But last year, a 7-game losing streak to end the year. The year prior, a 7-game losing streak to end the year. Now they have a 7-game winless streak in the middle of the year. So, if that goes on to 12 games, then sure, we can say, this team is worse than last year. But they still have a chance to regroup. And I actually think we talk about often, is this bye week coming at the right time? I couldn't imagine a better time for this bye week for this team. Not only to get healthy, but just to sort of reset mentally and get your sort of psyche back. Take a breath, back up, go home, do whatever you need to do, and then come back and attack these 5 games remaining. They have to finish above 500 in these last 5, and I think they will. They have Calgary twice, which certainly benefits them. But I think they do also need some help. They do need to watch that Winnipeg-Edmonton series and hope that Winnipeg wins. If Edmonton somehow manages to win both, then it muddles up the West Division even more. Saskatchewan does have Edmonton later in the year, so there's lots to be still written, and I think this bye week, like I said, comes at a great time to just sort of reset, get that belief back. They haven't thrown the towel in on the season yet, so they're still in it. They, like Christian said, they still control their destiny. They are still in a playoff spot, 1 point up. So lots of season left.
Rod, the crazy thing with Calgary to me is that, they are a team that over the years, I think we would all agree, we just expect to be in the playoffs. Like that's just kind of been their mantra over the years. What do you see? And I know you talked about confidence there too, but I mean, execution obviously is extremely important. The fact that Dave Dickinson thought that he could play a guy like Logan Bonner and he just didn't respond and then kept him on the field. I don't know if that would have been disrespectful to him and pull him and put Jake back in the game. But I mean, yeah, I think we've all got our question marks about Jake Maier, but I have to believe he gives you the best chance to win. No?
Well, that goes hand in hand with what Taylor said. Maybe they've realized the writing's on the wall in terms of 2024. They're already looking ahead. And maybe it's a sign from Dickinson saying to the front office, look, we can't win with what we've got here. So in terms of whomever is at the helm at quarterback, it's funny, Bubs, and I know we're going to get into it, but it's just deja vu here because last time I was on, we were talking about how bad Winnipeg was. Now they're on a win streak. We were talking about the quarterback situation in Edmonton and just how crazy. I can't remember the West being this crazy, this wide open, this far into the season at any point. Yeah, it's unbelievable what's happening in the West.
Christian, let's be honest here. And I know you talked about Maier. They shipped a future Hall of Famer out of town who's actually having a pretty good season on a team that's, maybe trying to turn things around for Jake Maier. This is his team. This was to be his team. And the guy that I think Dave Dickinson was going to trust for at least the next 5-6 years at the helm of the offense. Are you surprised at what we're seeing?
Well, they were 6-12 last year, right? And they kept their playoff streak going because Saskatchewan cratered, right? And 6-12 should never be good enough to make the playoffs. That's just ridiculous. But so they weren't good last year, and they're not good this year. So we saw signs last year that Jake Maier wasn't very good. They were the one team that didn't have quarterback injuries, right? Maier started the whole year, and they didn't do well. And I know there were injuries in spots, but every team has those. They made a bet that Bo Levi Mitchell was old, too expensive, and they went with their younger guy. And I think they lost that bet. We see that sometimes in coaches hitching their wagon to the wrong horse. And we saw that with Chris Jones and Taylor Cornelius playing him way too often. And that ultimately was part of what led to Jones's demise in Edmonton. So, Dave Dickinson may have made the wrong call here. And it's also possible that there was no correct answer because Bo Levi Mitchell, you kind of felt like it was over there in Calgary, right? And he gets a fresh start in Hamilton. He's had very mixed results, but he's also getting up there. Jake Mayer's not old by any means, right? And just isn't getting the job done. He's very mediocre, too many picks. And I don't know if this is because Jake Mayer, his game isn't good enough, but the imagination and creativity lacks in Calgary's offensive play calling, right? There's so many screens and hitches, and when they go deep, it usually works actually, but they did take so few deep shots. Mayer just checked down all the time. And
is that him or is that the head coach?
That I don't know, right? I'd have to
That's
ask.
Confidence.
That's
Calgary. Confidence right there, I think too. Yeah.
Okay, because Mayer's he's out there all the time, right? He's the starter because who else is there? They put in Logan Bonner, who he's fine, but I don't know what to do in Calgary. Honestly, maybe just flush it and start over. I'm not sure, because when you made the playoffs 20 straight years, right, you just expect to be there. Now all of a sudden, I think they have to take a hard look in the mirror after last year's bad season, this year's bad season, and be like, all right, what do we actually have here? And do we have to start over?
Taylor, just last thing on this. I look around the league, I see Calgary guys that are pretty good all over the league. Like, was their mentality in sort of saying, we'll replace this guy, we'll replace this receiver, especially on offense over the years? Kadeem Carey is a pretty good running back that maybe should be in Calgary.
Yeah, I mean, you could really make that argument for any team is why did they get rid of this? I think we talked about it earlier this year. Why did Saskatchewan get rid of Justin McInnes? He's leading the league in receiving. So you can make that case for a lot of players. Justin McInnes was never that player in Saskatchewan. Kadeem Carey was good in Calgary, but they decided to move on. They had some decent running backs behind him. And same with the Bo Levi Mitchell thought. They obviously thought that he was past his prime and they were going to move on and see who's next, see who's coming up behind him. They liked what they saw in Jake Mayer, and I never really saw it. He looked okay. He had the arm and he looked like he had a bit of flash, but he never, to me, was that. He was never trending to be elite when he got his first few starts in the league. I really didn't see the it factor from him. So I was kind of surprised that they moved on and chose him and really didn't bring in anybody else. In saying that, they've started their backup now. So I say that's a sign to look ahead to next season. And what does next season look like? You can't really rebuild in the CFL, but you can attack free agency, see what quarterbacks are out there, see what key players are out there, and work your team in free agency. So yeah, they've let a few players go, but they've also retained quite a few core pieces of their team. Reggie Bagleton continues to be a great player. Cameron Judge in the middle, right? A former Rider. I can't believe they let him go type of player. Is just an elite linebacker. So Calgary still has the talent. They're just they're not showing it, and they don't have the quarterback to lead them right now.
Taylor, right back to you about Edmonton here. Interesting situation again, and this is a team now compared to the Stamps. They're on the upturn. Like, they have incredible confidence right now, and they're in a bye week right now. And this, I found this real interesting, is that Jarius Jackson, after watching McLeod Bethel-Thompson and one game throw for nearly 500 yards, put together back-to-back wins over Calgary. And he's already said that Tre Ford's going to be his starter when they come off the bye week and face the Bombers. Does that surprise you?
No, they beat Calgary, so I don't know if they've really made a statement. They beat Calgary or Bethel Thompson beat Calgary, so I don't know if that's a big statement to say, like, oh, we need to stick with our number one quarterback, I guess, to start the season. I still think Tre Ford gives Edmonton the best chance to win games down the stretch. I think he's the better all-around quarterback, and he gives that team confidence. You saw Bethel Thompson, I believe it was, 7 straight losses to start the season. They go to 4, and all of a sudden there's this spark. They beat the Riders, and this team has belief back. And yeah, some of that can say they fired Chris Jones and named Jarius Jackson the head coach, and there's this behind-the-scenes stuff. But the on-the-field belief that they have with Tre Ford gives them the best chance to win games. So I'm not surprised. to see Jarius Jackson go to Tre Ford. I like to watch him play because he's more exciting than Bethel Thompson. He might not throw for 500 yards, but he could throw for 300 and run for another 100. So not surprising to me that they're going to hitch their wagon to Tre Ford, because I think all along he was sort of the eventual plan to be that next quarterback to lead this team for years to come.
Rod, I know as a Niagara Falls kind of guy that I know where you're leaning here. And really what the community were probably thinking about him being on the bench, Tre Ford being on the bench for so much this season.
Bubs, you had your free Tre Ford shirt on last time we met, I think, here.
Yes.
So, you don't have to sell me. I said he's a winner. He gets it done. Taylor said this as well. Dual threat. He can run as well. More exciting. And I guess it's smart in terms of Jarius Jackson making the calls. So there was no question about it. No one coming out of the bye week, no one wanted to know, and the question was answered. We're going with Tre Ford. And yeah, with what he can do, both in the air and on the ground, I think it's a good option. And I'm glad Tre Ford, we won't have to hear or see the T-shirts anymore. He is free.
Christian, I think if you're MBT, you got to be a little ticked, maybe. Or do you think he's a good team guy?
I think he's a little mad. I think he couldn't have done much more than he did, right? No. In this recent stretch. Now, he also at the start of the season wasn't quite doing enough for them to win. And Tre Ford, I think, had earned the starting job before he got hurt. Now, sports is littered with people who lost their job because they got hurt, and then the next guy came in, was great, and then they didn't get their job back. But Edmonton's future relies on Tre Ford, right? McLeod Bethel Thompson is this is I think a perfect situation in the CFL, because I think you need two quarterbacks to win. And right now it looks like they do have two quarterbacks to win, right? They have a diverse set of skills. And if something happens to Ford, which isn't out of the realm of possibility, then they have this guy, a competent veteran passer that can come in and sling it. But Edmonton is at their best when Tre Ford is starting, when Tre Ford is doing his thing. And with their two most important games of the year coming up against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, I think you want to give yourself the absolute best opportunity to win. And that is with Tre Ford at the helm. I personally think he's a lot of fun to watch. Bethel Thompson has moments for sure, and he definitely cooked against Calgary. But as Taylor mentioned, it is Calgary, and we just spent 15 minutes talking about how much they stink. So I think, as a Blue Bomber, a person that covers them, I think that Ford scares me more than McLeod Bethel Thompson does, right? And so what he does, and we've seen it in the past, he's done stuff against the Bombers before. So I think that's the better player for them in this scenario. And if it doesn't go well, then you have a guy that's been pretty good. You can put him in there.
And that leads to the exact what I was going is that we've seen this in the CFL right now. Unfortunately, Winnipeg are in trouble in that category right now, but that there are two guys that everyone seems to have, even in Riderville. They've got two guys that they can trust the offense with there. Taylor?
Yeah, I think that's really and I wrote about this to start the season. That's the model for success, in my opinion, to develop a quarterback. You get a veteran quarterback, you have a guy with some experience, and then you have a raw rookie who eventually will get experience. That's what the Riders had to start the season. They brought in Trevor Harris, obviously a veteran last year. They had Shea Patterson. They got him some more reps now in his, fourth year. And then they got a straight rookie out of Notre Dame and Jack Cohen. So they had this sort of succession plan to say, we have two quarterbacks with experience and one that will get experience eventually. And I think that, to me, is the model that teams should go. You never want to have a quarterback, start the year with – there are some exceptions, but you never want to have a guy with no experience or a full quarterback room with no experience. Or, contrary to veteran players, like, which one are you going to play type of scenario, right? And I think that was so surprising that Edmonton went out and signed Bethel Thompson this year after what Tre Ford did last year. That, to me, was probably the biggest shock this offseason, because you created this quarterback controversy when you didn't have one before. So I don't really like that model of having two good quarterbacks where you don't really know who's the better one, or you don't really know who you should start. Because I think you could make the argument that McLeod Bethel Thompson should be their starter and should lead them on a playoff run. In Saskatchewan, they know that Trevor Harris is the starter, and they know that Shea Patterson is maybe the future, depending on how things shake out this year.
Can we all agree, though? I don't know what you guys thought, that it brought a smile to my face. That just earlier this season, not all that long ago, a couple of months ago, we were shaking our heads saying, oh my goodness, what is happening in Edmonton? Is there 5,000 people in the stands? Like, it looked horrible, guys. And that last contest they had, I believe it was well over 30,000. Christian, it looks good for the sort of and I know the Bombers have done so well with their fan base and their stadium, but we got to have Edmonton as a good franchise in this league.
Yeah, totally. They've been around for 75 years and they've won a lot. So it's important that every franchise is healthy, but certainly Edmonton, it's been rough the last few years, right? Whenever you tune into an Elks game, and they're losing that game, there's no one there. So I think there's a few things to look at. The most recent game was a Labor Day game, right? Or part of the rivalry series. So let's see what happens next week when the Bombers are in town. Bombers travel well, so there'll be a lot of Winnipeg fans there. But it's winning, right? Winning cures it. If you're bad, no one wants to see you. If you're fun and you're winning, more people want to go see you. And it's an affordable product in the CFL. Going to an Elks game is not an expensive thing compared to an Oilers game, for instance. So it's really just about winning. And I think Tre Ford, in terms of, again, the product on the field, he is a more fun product. To have a Canadian quarterback that can electrify a fan base, I think that's even more important in Edmonton because they need something like that to really get that team and get that fan base going. So I know that Jarius Jackson is thinking about what would the fans want to see more when it comes to who starts at quarterback. But I think that it's part of the package of going to see an Elks game is going to see Tre Ford because you never know what he's going to do out there.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe you're going to see the owner driving a golf cart on the opponent's sideline.
That was wild.
Are you allowed to do that? I guess he owns a team. He can do whatever he wants.
That's right.
Hey, Rod, the Alouettes, I mean, obviously the best team in the league in terms of the record, 10-2 currently. And, of course, we look at the Coach of the Year award. And I don't know how you frame this up because sometimes it isn't always the Coach of the Year doesn't always come down to who had the most wins. But is Jason Maas the runaway Coach of the Year to you at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. Unless there's a major drop off here in the last few weeks of the season, Jason Ma should have that locked up already. Montreal, when we talk about how crazy the West is, there's been one consistency in the East, and that's been Montreal, and obviously Jason Maas leading them.
Christian?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's always a bit dangerous to give out awards when there's still a third of the season to play, but if Montreal goes on and finishes 14-4, 15-3, yeah, especially considering that Cody Fajardo was out for a number of games and they still won almost every game without him. Davis Alexander was a bit of a revelation in that regard, but to find ways to beat decent teams without your starter, who could be the MOP. We'll see how things go over the last half or third of the season. But if they fall off, and not to be a homer, but let's say the Winnipeg Blue Bombers win out, and after a 2-6 start, they're like 12-6 or 11-7, and they win the West, then I think Mike O'Shea gets some consideration there. But at the moment, it's probably Jason Maas, and then in second place right now, it's probably Bob Dice because the Ottawa Red Blacks have been nothing for years, and all of a sudden this year they're a lot of fun to watch. They're electric. They're winning a ton of football games. I'm still not sold on them being a Grey Cup contender, but they've won a lot this year, and so he's probably second place right now.
Yeah, Taylor, I think he certainly does deserve some votes because I don't know where you stood at the beginning of the season when you were making your preseason prognostications, but I think there's a lot of people that still thought Ottawa were going to be toast this year.
I had them better just because I think better than last year because I think Drew Brand is a good quarterback. But right. I would say Bob Dice would get my vote ahead of Jason Maas just based on the turnaround and the belief. Like a Grey Cup winning team comes on and has a good season. Well, the coach hasn't done much other than continue to maintain belief. But when you have that turnaround, that's what I always look at when it comes to coaching. What did this coach do to turn around this team? Or what did this coach do to instill belief? I would say Jarius Jackson right now, I don't know what he's done behind the scenes, but there's some belief in there. So he might very well get the West Coach of the Year vote, despite, coaching half a season because of that turnaround and that belief. I don't know if BC, like Rick Campbell, like sure, if BC goes on and wins the West, he might get a few votes. Mike O'Shea obviously get a few votes, but you got to look at, to me, you look at that turnaround, and players are one thing to have the right talent, but the coach who can instill belief in your team, to me, should get a vote. And I think Bob Dice has done a tremendous job of that in Ottawa this year based on where they were last year and even the year prior, right?
It's funny to hear the Ottawa Red Blacks players talk because it's something that is it's uniform. Every player talks about how great this guy is. Obviously, I basically spent a lot of time in Saskatchewan as an assistant coach as well too. Even people there talking about the quality of the man. But yeah, he's certainly well loved within his team.
I will say, one thing I will say is that Jason Moss will be the unanimous East Division coach. So I was just challenging the thought that I think Bob Dice has maybe done more, but I think when it comes down to it, if Montreal continues on, you can't not vote for a guy coming off a Grey Cup season and leading his team to a division crown to be named Coach of the Year, especially if they run away with it. So Jason Moss, to me, would probably get the nod for the Coach of the Year at this point in the season, but you can't not look at what Bob Dice has done. And yeah, he was here for a few years and just a tremendous guy.
No, Taylor, but I think a lot of people think that way when they think of the coach of the year. Like, who did the most coaching, right? There's something to be said about Moss. You know what? We have a winning formula here. We keep everything on the rails, and go forward. And, who we have to change attitudes. We have to sometimes punish people. And we've seen Bob Dice do that. We suffered tough losses. And how do we change the mentality to a winning mentality in this place? And it seems something's going on there. And more importantly, how do we win home games, right? Like, they're winning home games there once again. So it was an interesting week in terms of your viewership. And I think we all got things to do, but boy, I got sucked into the couch. I don't know about the rest of you guys on Saturday. 3 games on Saturday, 1 on Friday night. And now we may go into a situation. I know we have some 3-game weeks coming up, but there's also a situation where we can have double headers on each day. So if you had to have your choice, guys, Rod, we'll start with you here. 1 and 3 or 2 and 2?
2 and 2 for sure. And that goes hand in hand with, no Sunday games. Obviously, let's face it. Look, we all love the CFL. We're all Canadian. But to not play on Sunday is probably the best move the league can make. But 2 and 2 is my vote.
Taylor?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday schedule that they had throughout the summer. To me, that was great. I know there were some scheduling conflicts and teams didn't love that, and certain players didn't love that and got fined for that, for speaking out about that. But to me, I don't love triple headers. It's hard to sit down and watch 9 hours of football straight, and I know there are some overlap. But so the 2 and 2 model to me is the answer. And yes, no Sunday games when the NFL starts is another step in the right direction for this league as well.
Yeah, I'll make it unanimous. I think the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'm with Taylor. I loved it through the summer because it was just a little nibble of CFL every day, right? And then you could go do other summer stuff. But now that the NFL's here, good on the CFL to recognize, hey, you could be a fan of both things. We don't need you to pick one, right? We'll get out a Thursday, we'll get out a Sunday, and go with the, I think, 2 and 2. I was, not on the couch because I was on the sideline for the Banjo Bowl, so luckily I didn't have to miss much in either other game because they both were stinkers because they were both blowouts. But I think that 3 is a lot, right? And if I'm going to be, this is not the CFL's concern, but if I'm going to be watching 10 hours of NFL on Sunday, I don't really want to be watching 9 hours of CFL on Saturday. So I think the doubleheader is good. You got enough teams in Western time zones, right, to make this work, right? So you have a West team at night and on the Friday, and then you could even have afternoon games in the day. I loved it. 2 p.m. Central start for the Banjo Bowl. I wish we had more afternoon games. Honestly, it was great. I was out of there. I was at home by like 7. It was awesome. So I think the 2 and 2 makes the most sense. And yeah, we got a 3-game week this week, and they put the doubleheader on Saturday instead of Friday, which I think is great because you go up against college football, but I think it's a bit more of a niche audience. So I like what they're doing here.
And can we all agree that having a game brought on, games being played on CTV on the national network, it's a no. Well, it hasn't happened for years, but it was a no-brainer.
Yeah, no, exactly. More eyes on the game, more eyes on the product. When was the last time?
It was 1986.
Was it really? Wow.
That long?
Okay.
Yeah, that's what Rod Smith said on one of the broadcasts, so I take his word for it.
Yes,
No,
for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Like
in Rod, we trust. Yeah. No. Yeah. Wow. That is impressive. No. More exactly. If you get more eyes on the product, more eyes on the game, that more people are going to get the opportunity to watch when it's on CTV. Hallelujah.
And you mean, and for your national product at the end of the season in terms of the Grey Cup as well too. No offense to the fine people at TSN, but I think that game needed to be, and all the playoffs as well too, on the national network there, Taylor.
Yeah, and it's the playoff games are on both, and I think that is what the answer should be. I don't know why they couldn't offer the regular season games on both CTV and TSN. Obviously, more eyeballs is a step in the right direction, so getting it on CTV is the right direction. But there was people wondering, how do I find this game? I don't have because they only subscribe to TSN, so you have to go download the CTV app and stream it that way. And so it's just that is such a small barrier, but it is a barrier to some people. So to be able to offer it on both, I don't see why they couldn't do that for the regular season. If there was, I don't know. Must have been some sort of logistical issue, but for them to do that in the playoffs, that is the answer, to offer it on both. More eyeballs, right? That's only going to grow this game.
Yeah, and I was talking to Derek Taylor, Bomber Voice, on my show about this last week because I thought it was great. Then he kind of presented the devil's advocate side of it. Like, how many people in this day and age have CTV but not TSN? And I think with bundling and cord cutting, I think the amount of people that have like 4 channels and one of them CTV, I think it's probably lower than it's really ever been, right? But there are still people in rural areas, I think, that maybe only have a few channels. And if you look at the ratings, more people are going to watch it if it's on CTV, right? Anytime you will look at any kind of comparison in the States with if it's on ESPN or if it's on ABC or if it's on FS1 or Fox, like if you compare the cable to the network, it's always more when it's on the network, right? And the big thing for me is the Grey Cup, right? This is your biggest game, and it isn't available to all Canadians, right? If CTV, anyone can watch CTV, right? TSN's a specialty channel, and I know a lot of people have it, but more people are going to watch the Grey Cup this year than they have in a very long time. It was on CBC for a long time, and TSN grabbed all the rights. But I think to put it on national TV, this is something I've thought specifically for the Grey Cup they've needed to do for a long time. And it will be on TSN as well. Just a point of specificity, the West and semifinal and West final are just on TSN. The East semifinal and East final are on TSN and CTV. So
interesting. Okay.
They are not double headering the West final into the CTV. They're just doing one on CTV on those weekends. But the Grey Cup's on both. So I think specifically for the Grey Cup, that's something that needed to happen, I think, a long time ago.
You know, I think it's easy for us to say because we're all sports guys, right? But I think there's a lot of people out there that aren't, quote, sports guys that, you know, when it comes to the Grey Cup, maybe even the playoffs, they'll peek in because it's on free, quote, free TV, right? I think that's the big difference there because I think, and the CFL, we all know this, it's got its fan base. It's the people outside of the fan base that they have to attract to say, hey, check out our product. Or if, hey, I don't know, Shania Twain's playing halftime, you know, have a look at this, right? Like it's, I think you got to have it on free TV. And it's like you said, 86. Wow, what a surprise. I knew it was a while. I didn't think it was that long. All right, guys, there are the 3 games this week. BC hosting Toronto. Maybe a Grey Cup preview. Ottawa at Hamilton, fighting for their lives, the Ticats. Montreal at Calgary. The game of the week, Rod Mawhood, is
BC and Toronto. And how many times, I think 90% of our conversation today has been on the quarterbacks. And just because you've got Chad Kelly coming off that season you mentioned and the off-season troubles, you got Nathan Rourke coming back from the NFL, and he hasn't lit it on fire, let's be honest. So I think that's just the most intriguing game is the Lions and Argos.
Taylor?
I would agree. I think that has the most intrigue. And to me, this week, I know we've talked about it, all the intrigue that there is on any given week. I would say there's 3 very favorited teams this week that they should win. BC should win. Montreal should win. Ottawa should win. Will there be an upset? We'll have to obviously find out. But to me, this is and I don't really understand why they only have 3 games and why they let 3 teams have a bye this week. Obviously, there's the schedule thing. I still like the 4 games and just giving one team a bye. But yeah, I'll agree with Rod and say the BC Toronto game. But again, every game has a bit of intrigue, and if somebody can manage an upset, there'll be lots to talk about next week.
Cats.
Well, right, if they want to stay in it somehow.
Just saying. Go ahead, Christian.
Yeah, in week 18 and 20, there's also 3 game weeks, and it's kind of it dulls the week a little bit for me. Mm-hmm. I think it takes a bit of the wind out of the sails. NFL will do this too, right? Where they'll have weeks where no one's on bye, and weeks where 4 teams are on bye, and a week where 6 teams are on bye, so you have less games. But I think by default, the game of the week is Toronto BC, because there are 2 teams in that game that are playoff teams. And the other 2 games have probably just 1 team that's in the playoffs. Now, Hamilton can save their season, I think, with a win here. And if Toronto loses, then they're still 4 points back, which is still a lot, right? So a lot has to go Hamilton's way for them to get into the playoffs this year. Ottawa, their point differential, they're still +4. They're 8-3-1, and they have a +4 point differential. They've not been very good on the road. So there's that to look at. For Calgary, I do think they're dead. I don't think there's much there. Now, they should have won in Montreal earlier in the season, so they're a team that at that time was competitive. They really haven't been. I'm also curious about Montreal because, they come out of the bye week and BC takes it to them. And Montreal hasn't looked dominant in a bit. I want to see them, if they're really the Grey Cup champion repeat tour, right, go into Calgary and smoke them. Just demoralize Calgary. But in terms of a 2-sided, both teams showing up, Toronto BC is probably the one. Toronto coming off a game where they looked bad, and BC coming off a game that made them look like the best team in the West, right? And that's 2 weeks in a row now where they have beaten really good East teams that had been dominating the West to this point in the season. So there's things to look for in every game, but I think there's the most to look for in Toronto BC on Friday. A late start for you guys in the East.
Taylor, tell me because you've seen this before. You've seen this scenario play out. I didn't think Cody was very good in Montreal's last game. And there's people out there that believe Davis Alexander is actually a better quarterback than Cody. Are you of that belief?
I don't know if he's I think he has a higher ceiling or he is maybe the quarterback of the future, Davis Alexander, but I think Cody gives them the best chance to win again this year. And I think not starting Cody would disrupt the locker room. It would disrupt the team. It would, that to me, you can't take this guy who's coming off a Grey Cup season and obviously he was hurt and Davis Alexander looked great. And we're like, appointing him the next greatest thing for the Alouettes, but you can't not start Cody unless he does falter and has several bad games in a row. And then you go to Davis Alexander, sure, down the stretch if the Alouettes somehow falter. But no, you can have one bad game if you're that good of a quarterback like Cody Fajardo is. I still think he's elite based on how he manages the game. He doesn't necessarily have the greatest arm or the greatest legs, but just sort of the whole package and the belief that he has and the ability that he has to win games late gives Montreal the best chance. And you don't want to disrupt the locker room at this point in the season by benching him.
Rod, last one to you. Ticats and the Red Blacks played a real close game earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
Could it happen?
I think there's definitely, obviously, Christian pointed it out, the troubles, and I think you mentioned it too. Ottawa on the road has not been good. That +4 point differential. This is a big game for the Ticats, huge standings wise, and Ottawa needs to prove they can win on the road. So, despite us all picking the Argos and Lions as the game of the week, there's going to be intrigue, as Taylor mentioned, in all these games, and don't be surprised the Tabbies come out on top in this one. I won't be surprised.
Football friends, the Ticats Audio Network is where you certainly want to be for the CFL's unofficial second season as we track those Tiger Cats in. Let's see if they make a push to the playoffs. Lots of daily content on the build-up to game day, and we will have you all primed up for kickoff on Saturday. So you want to join us. That's starting at 2 o'clock. It is the Ottawa Red Blacks. They're coming to Tim Hortons Field for a little Eastern bloodbath. Let's see what happens. Hey, you guys, fantastic performance as always. Knew it. Figured so. You guys are just telling it as it is, and we appreciate your opinion, your candor, and a little humor as well, too. But obviously, there are fans sometimes that want to reach out and touch you a little bit. Christian Aumell, how can they do so if they want to talk maybe a little Bombers football?
I am on the website formerly known as Twitter as @CJOB Christian. You could always email me, christian@cjob.com as well.
It will always be known as Twitter for me.
Same. Yeah, I'm not calling it X.
It's tough. It's tough to call it X.
What is X anyway? Why X?
It's Elon Musk's fetish. I don't know. He's just weird.
Taylor, where can we find you? We want to reach out and touch you and find out about what's going on with Saskatchewan and this crazy slide that they're on.
Yeah, reach me on Twitter, Taylor_Shire. And if you want to read more Rider content, just visit Leader-Post.com.
Well, one of the most passionate fan bases out there. It's got to be really fun for you to cover that team. Rod, of course, Niagara Sports Report, cranking out great content every week. Where can we talk to you if we want to know about what's going on in this? I guess the most southern part of Southern Ontario.
Pretty well, yeah, exactly. You mentioned Niagara Falls there, but at Mawhood on Twitter /X, RMAWHOOD, and you just said Niagara Sports Report. Check it out, podcast anytime, live on the air at 610 CKTB as well.
And you reach into the Bills as well, too, or don't you?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What a great win that was for them this weekend. A little slow start, but Ben, that Allen, boy, he's nuts.
Josh Allen, yeah, two TDs in the air, 2 on the ground. So, yeah, big win.
All right, guys, thanks for joining us. Folks, thank you for joining us. Enjoy the games. We look forward to chatting with you and chopping it up and getting you set for another big week of CFL football. This has been the CFL This Week. I'm Bubba O'Neil. Check you out next week.